So, welcome everybody. Welcome to another inspirational interview here. My name is Michael King. I'm the face behind Artful Minds. A little bit of Artful Minds. The goal really is to help artists with their artistic development and growth. It's pretty simple. If you want to check us out, have a look at artfulminds.ca. Sorry, little glitch there. Artfulminds.ca. Our inspirational interview tonight is with an artist who I cut my teeth on with two of his books. One's on landscape painting, and the other one was about light and color. And I still refer to them to this day, along with my John Carlson's plein air book. He's also recognized as one of America's most accomplished impressionist plein air painters. And I'm talking about Kevin MacPherson. So thank you very much for this interview tonight. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, Mike. I appreciate you too.
Thank you. What I want to do is I'm going to scroll through about a dozen of your works here. I'm going to share my screen. And as I do so, if you can just give us a little short synopsis of yourself as an artist, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I'll just kind of start with a little bit about myself. I always knew I'd be an artist. By the time I was 7, I won the whole grade school art competition in Catholic school and stuff. But I kind of really remember just thinking to myself, I'll be an artist. But I really didn't know what that meant. Didn't really have any mentor or direction. But it ended up to be like a dream. And to be honest, the life as an artist, I think it has been a dream life because doing something you truly love to do kind of is self-propulsion. You know what to do in a way, even though everything is new on you. But very few people get to do something that they truly love. And so it is a lot of work, but people can't tell, like my friends and family can't tell, am I working or am I playing? So, that's a perfect thing. So that was a little, sample of the variety of type of things I do. And because my life is full of travel and meeting different people and filled with variety of activities, I'm just open to any subject that kind of comes into my life. And I think, a reflection of, all my paintings are pretty much a reflection of what inspired me, what I saw, what I did. And so it kind of one thing leads to the next. You don't know what you're going to paint, really.
Yeah, thank you for that. Now, you talked about how being an artist, you're kind of living a dream, but I remember in one of the other interviews that I watched of you, you were talking about how you and Wanda took off to a country and you only had like $5,000. And when you came back, you basically had nothing and you had to start from scratch. I mean, that coming back and starting from scratch couldn't have been too much of a dream, was it?
Well, actually, we got married. So I was out of school 1 year. And when I met Wanda at Northern Arizona University my last year, I was already out of money. And she gave me her lunch card. So, that kind of survived that part of it. But then I got a job as an illustrator down in Phoenix. I was one of the few to graduate in the top of my class in art and got job offers every studio I went to as being a freelance illustrator. But I took the highest paying one, which was $650 a month. So even after the 4 years of school and all that, and it wasn't a lot of money. So, but I worked for a year and a half or so, or about a year, and then Wanda and I said, "Do you want to go to Ireland?" She said, "Okay." And then I thought, well, maybe we should get married before. So we got married. I sold everything. I had a little car, a little motorcycle, and saved up, for the year of working. So I had $5,000. And we took that and we stayed for 6 months until we had $10. And we came back. And
Nice.
So, it was only a year or so working. So I had nothing. So I came back with nothing. And, so it wasn't a big deal for me. I grew up quite simple. And so that was okay,
Okay, so you're used to that kind of living as well.
Yeah. But I think, as an artist, Wanda and I decided not to have children. So, having a family, is a big commitment. You have to make decisions that are different than, what we could have made, perhaps, taking off like that and being both accepting, if we come back with nothing or, if we're painting for a show and 6 months we make no money, how do we survive until we maybe make a little bit to pay for the frames we bought or whatever. So, if you have children and you just have different responsibilities. So that, a lot of artists I know don't have children, but a lot do, and I think it's great. But it's a different pressure.
Absolutely.
And Wanda,
absolutely.
having a wife or a spouse to support you, not financially, but in decision making, willing to take those risks. is also really big.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, she saw the long game in you, I guess, eh?
Yeah, I think so. She has all the accounts. I have no way to know what we have.
Oh, that's so funny. That's so
Yeah.
funny. And I just want to take a moment to say to everyone attending, thank you very much for coming. It's a little bit different interview in the sense that the first 30 minutes is going to be Kevin and I chatting. And then the last 30 minutes is actually open to questions from everybody who's in attendance tonight. Of course, I want to talk about painting, right? And so I have a question here. What's more powerful for a painting? One that draws you in from a distance or one that looks just amazing close up?
I think the combination, and
Oh, you can't answer
that's why
that.
I have my students try to get into their painting because, I like to go into a gallery or a museum. I tell them, let's just go in the center of the room and see what painting draws you in. So the composition, you have no idea what the subject is, but the dark light and color shapes are going to attract you. And then you get up there and then you see the subject or you see the brushwork or, you come up with an impressionistic painting and you get close and you go, you can't make sense of it. And so it engages you. And then they step back. All of a sudden, the reality happens.
Hmm.
And so the longer we can keep them engaged, then I think it's successful. So the combination, sometimes a highly rendered painting for myself, you look at it, I may be totally amazed at the technical abilities to it, but that kind of back and forth, you might not have that part of it in there.
Hmm.
So for me, having a painting that is abstract first and then the reality fits in that structure is what I try to achieve in my paintings or what I try to teach my students.
Yeah. Okay. So there isn't a single easy answer, is there? I guess this made me start thinking about my times walking around galleries and being drawn to a lot of stuff. And anything with high contrast, found really interesting. But what I always thought really interesting is the Impressionists. Like you look at some of Monet's later work, and I was lucky I got to go to France in 2010, and I got to see some of his work in person. But what was really interesting is when I was walking around, what attracted me to them wasn't necessarily so much that idea that contrast draws me in, but just the amount of color is there. And
Mm.
one thing I found out later is that his later impressionistic work is really all about color in kind of the same compressed value. Because when you turn to Monet's paintings in the black and white, they're quite, compressed values, but when you open them up, they are very colorful and very attractive, right? So this brings me to the question, we always hear about how values are so important. Values are so important. But when you kind of get to the Impressionists, values aren't really that important. Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I think what you were saying about Monet's work, he can make his painting into values, say, so close. And so values, we have 10, but color, we have millions. And so to get the variety within each of those few shapes that he makes, I think is what makes him so brilliant. That's real control when you can control the temperature and not lose the value. And so his paintings are really powerful in abstract, simple 4 or 5 shapes, maybe 2 or 3 values.
Yeah.
Edgar Payne was really good at that too. He would close in his top range and bottom range. So his values were quite close too. So I have a beautiful painting of his, Sierra Snow Scene. And I love showing my students. I put a white piece of paper next to the brightest snow color in the thing. And the snow might be like a value 3 or 4 gray,
Mm.
quite a few values away from white. Then as dark is quite a few values from black. So he's really closing them in. And that makes for a more harmonious paintings, really, when you're not using as high contrast. So high contrast can be really powerful. Instantly you're grabbed to it.
Hmm.
But maybe it doesn't hold you as long. But someone like Franz Klein's, his high contrast black and white calligraphic type of strokes, I love those too. So
Yeah, good
yeah,
point, right? Yeah. So I guess that's what makes art so interesting is everyone's so different.
yeah,
And
there's so many
yeah,
ways we can do it.
yeah,
Yeah, controlling values. I think as an impressionist painter, many people call themselves a colorist,
yes.
and usually when I hear that, it means they know nothing about value. They just buy all the colors and they throw them there, and the color is just usually garish and
Yeah.
things like that. But the ones who are true colorists control their values, control their harmonies,
Yeah.
so beautifully and stuff.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. 100%. Now, you mentioned attractiveness and abstraction, but do you find yourself gotten more abstract with
I hope so.
the longer that you've been painting?
Yeah, I hope so. There's when you have the combination for myself, the abstract and the realism together. I try to teach my students. Realism is we're working with abstract languages, flat pieces of color. So it's all abstract, and when we can get past the thing thinking,
Hmm.
all we're doing is, I have this new method and videos out that I've been working on for a decade or more called the magic grid.
Oh, yeah, I
And
want to talk about that.
yeah, I have such great success with my students, people who are just starting with nothing. It's amazing how they can understand that two-dimensional abstract language so quickly. And then people who are very advanced, it can up their color game. And, it's way more than just composition and other things. So it really encompasses all the language of art: line, shape, edges, value, and color, what we're dealing with. And so the abstract stuff, abstract painting, truly non-objective painting is not easy. There's some brilliant stuff, and we can learn so much if we're a realist painter by looking at obviously the shapes of it, the division of spaces, and the textural qualities. All the different things that we can incorporate in our realism too. So, there's great abstract art, there's terrible abstract art, great representational, terrible representational. But for me, like, the more I'm working in, as I said, this magic grid is making me understand composition so much better and having fun, a whole new inspiration for myself as I look at a painting
Oh, no
and make,
doubt, right?
yeah.
Yeah, anything to keep it fresh and exciting, right?
Yeah, we have to, I've been professional for 40 years. So how do we maintain the enthusiasm? How do we maintain our curiosity and our inspiration? But truly, I wake up every day, and when I open my eyes, first thing I see is like the color of the light against the walls, like, and see the color combinations like a Rothko painting coming through my window, the
Yeah.
orange light of the day, turn the walls green or whatever it is, so it's hard for me to turn it off. It's hard for me to drive a car because I can't focus.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I drive my wife crazy by saying, "Oh my God, look at that cloud. It's very violet." And she
I
goes, "What are
know.
you talking about? It's gray."
Yeah. And you miss the green light and you're looking up at the green cloud,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Yeah.
right. Eh? That's
Yeah.
funny. And with this grid, I'm finding we'll talk about it more in a bit, but initially though, it creates a lot of sense of more variety. I'm finding because nothing's symmetrical. Having said that, though, in one of your past interviews, you've discussed a need for repetition as it creates harmony and unity. And repetition has always been something I've been against. So this was kind of interesting to hear. And you explained it with this one painting here of, it's called A Good Smoke, and I'll just bring it up here.
Mm.
And could you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, repetition, yeah, is harmony. So you mentioned we want unity and variety, to create, something that's one of the key things in making a good piece of artwork. So unity is the harmony, it is the repetition. So this painting, you can see if the vertical axis is throughout the painting. So, it's repeated, like even the little guy in the background. So we have the first line that you indicate, but then, the side of his head also lines on there, and the little guy. And then there's many lines that are vertical.
Yeah.
So we're starting with a canvas, and it's, on the vertical side of it. So horizontally and vertically, anytime we repeat horizontals or verticals, we're repeating, we're bringing similarity, we're harmony. But if we just have solely, all vertical, say, and nothing
Mm.
opposing it, so we only have unity, which is okay, but we need the variety. So we need contrast, and contrast of color, contrast of line, contrast of shape, always thinking those type of things. So I use a limited palette also, and this particular palette was just orange, purple, and green. to create this painting. So that adds similarity. I'm not using red, yellow, and blue, which is the wider spectrum. So already orange is red and yellow. Um, Purple is red and blue. So using, harmonious colors, more repetition of color. So I'm not stretching that range, just like I talked about Edgar Payne's limited value. That's repetition and harmony. So all those things come into play that, if you just, I think probably, your question might have been like, okay, repetition. Let's say we have a picket fence.
Yes.
Repeated, or we have 4 trees, they're all the same size, all the same spacing. That's boring.
Yeah.
So how can we have that? How do we have 4 trees that are same size, same spacing, and find variety in there? That's the challenge. So.
Yeah. And as you're talking, I think I realized that, saying, oh, okay, so it's repetition of either the verticals or even the angles within the scene, but
Right.
it's not equal repetition. There's still variety in there.
Exactly. So if we're looking at a field of aspen trees, that are on the side of my house in New Mexico, these uprights, like Leviton, did some great aspen paintings. And, look at the variety, some taller, some shorter, some angled, it's the spacing, the division of spacing. And so the magic grid gives me so many opportunities to be aware of the spacing of things, to add that similarity and variety to at the same time.
You got me back into the magic grid, but because I think I know it. It's Andrew Loomis. He introduced it in one of his books called pretty much Informal Subdivision.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so it is that, and that. Okay,
yeah, and Andrew Loomis, I think, says it the best and the closest to the way I use it. There's a man, Michael Jacobs, and Hambridge was the first artist to kind of talk about dynamic symmetry. So it's dynamic symmetry. And then Andrew Loomis, who has one of the greatest books. You and I talked about, like, what is a great book that you recommend? I think Creative Illustration by Andrew Loomis.
Yeah.
One of the best books as an illustrator and as a fine artist, and so clearly written. And so he talks about the asymmetrical subdivision. And so many of the other books get so technical and mathematical, it just bores the heck out of it. And he found a really simple way to stimulate his compositional concepts, and get kind of inspiring ideas that just come to you. And so the way I use it is very similar to him, but then I take it and I use it for color and composition, like he does, and brushwork. There's so many facets that help you. The way I use it, that's a whole different ball game. That's why I find it. But every time I use it, I just went on a trip to we did a cruise down the Antarctic for 21 days, and I made like 25 panels with grids on them already. So I have no idea what I'm going to paint. And then when I look at my scene, every one I just pull out, it just fits in perfect.
Isn't that amazing, eh?
It's the weirdest thing. It's really fun.
And do you think if you pulled out another one, it would still match what you're going to paint?
Oh, yeah. You just find, how did it know I wanted a line here or something? They're all, but it will find ways, instead of being so dictated by your reference, whether you're painting from life or from a photo. You need to be the art director. So you need to, have a structure, whatever that may be, and then fit your image in there. Yeah. And this just makes it, I wouldn't have thought of, putting it down this way or that way. You just see different things. So anyway, it's been a thing that I was doing for my own compositions. I had a really big painting that was in an exhibition in China, and that was the first time I used it back in maybe 2011, that concept. And boy, it just really made me more aware of composition and how to understand it, how to decipher it. And now, going into a museum, you could see the structure that the artists use. It's really great learning for that. So it's been fun for me.
Yeah, you have me intrigued now. I might have to go buy the DVD. I think you have a DVD or a stream on your website that you can purchase for that, right?
You can get it, right? Like you can get the stream.
Well, you got me intrigued. But I knew of it just because it reminded me a lot of the Andrew Loomis stuff. And I've been preparing for your interview. And so I got back into it. And before this, though, I was really into dynamic symmetry and the grids and stuff like that. And I really enjoyed that. But when I came back to this with Andrew Loomis, I found that I could actually sketch with it. I could create with it. Whereas a dynamic symmetry grader is kind of a thing that I'd look at to determine what I need to do. But with the informal subdivision, or what you call the magic grid, I could actually sketch with it, which I find very interesting because now a sketch can develop more
Oh,
so. I found it really amazing.
yeah. So definitely, I've written 4 books, and this I find, and all my books, you mentioned them earlier. I still feel very proud of them. I don't like to read myself. So I think I've written books than I've ever read, and I'm good at simplifying things. It takes me a long time to learn something,
Mm,
but I'm good at then translating to others in a very simple form. And then the magic grid truly has been the most phenomenal method for me teaching people, even beyond the books that I've done. It just
yeah.
puts it together in such a really great learning method. So, some say, I'm not good at math. I'm not good at any of that type of stuff either. So there's no math involved. That's so easy.
Yeah. If you could draw a straight line, you're done, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Now going back to, you said you went to Antarctica, right, for your 21 day.
Yeah.
And now this could be anywhere, but it coincides with your Antarctica trip and you took 25 panels. But when you're there, how do you determine, like when you're anywhere, how do you determine what you're going to paint? What draws you to a location? What speaks to you when you say, I'm going to put down my easel, I'm going to paint this?
Obviously, I've always liked to travel. And so the plein air painting and the travel is the perfect companion. And so we like to go to different places. And so being inspired by, I'm so lucky, this is my view here. I don't know if people can see it, but
Look at that yellow in the sky. That's just amazing.
yeah. And the island in the background's catching all this nice end of the daylight.
Absolutely.
So, so obviously, like for an artist to be in inspiring places, is good for the soul, good to do that. And so with all my travels, let's say I'm going to Italy or Antarctic, you're going to find visual stimulation. And so Italy will have inspiring old buildings and architecture that, I don't see here perhaps, or whatever it might be. And then Antarctica was another place, just all the mountains and the snow. It was so neat. So you're going to find something to excite you. And then what is it of that place that does excite you? And it's usually just light and color and patterns of light and shadow. So it's, you could go to the most beautiful scene and mountain that most people would expect, but if the light's not right, if the pattern of light and shadow is not right, it won't inspire me. So, sometimes I've been in villages in Europe with my students, and they say, "Can I watch you paint?" I say, "Sure." And I may walk for hours.
No way.
Oh yeah, and like they're just dragging behind me. Eventually, they all give up, but and then all of a sudden, boom, the light hits, and
Isn't
and
that funny?
and it does it. And then on a certain day, you just don't get inspired. So really, I'm quite nearsighted. So often when I'm in the area that I know I'm going to do a painting, I take my glasses off. So I'm not seeing the subject, but I'm seeing that, like Monet's impressions of color, the color combinations, the light and shadow combinations.
Hmm. I guess you
Yeah.
have an advantage there,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
eh?
Well, I do think, when I was young, I didn't know I couldn't see until I got a lot of baseballs and things. But actually, my coach said, "You better go to see an eye doctor or something." I was 10 years old, but I think I saw color, differently than a lot of people.
Hmm.
Just that's how I grew up. Like
Yeah,
if you never knew, you have glasses too. If we didn't know we couldn't see, we wouldn't know we couldn't see.
that's
That's it,
true.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I think I see color before I see detail.
And then is your goal, like you're so accomplished now, when you go out to plein air paint, chances are you're going to get a finished painting regardless. But previously, was your goal to finish your painting, or was it just to take notes and to document what you're seeing so then you could apply that experience to other paintings that you're creating?
A combination. My most all my work was done in plein air, finished, mostly, fully finished outside, and ideally, I like that because tomorrow I'll have a different mood, different feeling. I'd rather have the conversation right in front of my subject, looking directly, making those decisions directly. So, working within the window of time frame to finish a painting, whether it was a very small painting like the sunset right now, I'd only have, 15, 20 minutes. So I better work small to do that. So that's kind of the goal to finish. However, I think when we go out, if we go out and we try to say, I'm going to make a painting, I'm going to make a beautiful finished painting, that's a pressure that I don't think is wise to do to yourself sometimes, like obviously we want to, but I think just going out and seeking the color notes, you mentioned like, go out and show your friends the colors you saw, say, oh, I see a piece of blue. Look at this shape here. Look at that, and magically the painting ends up being created. But, if you put a pressure on you, oh, I'm out here to make a painting, I'm out here to paint a subject, these things, I think you'll fail or succeed as easily. But if you just say, I just want to show my friend, look at this color, make them aware of this.
That's
I
a
think,
great way to think about that.
yeah, it really is. And so let's say you get 2 or 3 color notes and you don't finish your painting, you've succeeded.
Yeah.
And then you take some photos and things like that. And maybe those 5 color notes are enough to get you going in the studio to do a nice, beautiful finished painting with some truthful color notes that you wouldn't have seen if you just took your photo.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. No, that's a great way to think about that. I'm gonna have to steal that one. Our 30 minutes are up, so we're going to go into people's questions. One already in the chat, and it has to refer to the a good smoke painting that we were looking at before. And he's asking, in the painting, you used orange and purple and green, but there's no green or purple. How did you get blue and red with that palette?
It's relationships. If you mix orange and purple together, you can get your reddest red with that. And then the green and red and all those mixtures, you'll get every variety of color. I've done so many paintings with that palette, and you'd swear I have yellow on there, you'd swear I have blue on there. And so how do we make those colors, if you have something really blue in your scene and you have purple and green, sometimes the combination of those 2 colors, green and purple, next to each other can make the most beautiful blue sky you could ever imagine. So gray, in a sense, if I do many paintings with black with no blues at all, I try to make something with blue, you would never imagine I didn't have blue on there. So
Yeah, that's right. It's like the typical Zorn palette. You swore he used blue, but he never did,
exactly,
right? Yeah.
so what's the bluest spot of my painting? So black and white is as blue as I can get. So learning to use a limited palette, red, yellow, and blue, or orange, purple, green, or I do love to do portraits with cad green light and red and black or something, strange colors. It's amazing the feeling you'll get. And again, it makes a harmony because it's a more limited range, but it teaches you more about color than if you buy all the colors at the store.
Yeah, for sure. I have to agree with that 100% because if you want to up your color mixing game, start using like triads and trying to get that relationship instead of always wanting to go to your blue and yellow to mix green, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now, I guess you talk about painting with a lot of grays and muted colors, and it got me thinking about your pond. If everybody who knows Kevin, he knows this whole series of paintings done with the pond, one a day, just capturing the atmosphere. I think he did 100 of them.
I did.
And I think a lot of them were quite
368 of them for the
Oh,
series.
did you really? Oh, damn, that's way more than I thought you did.
Yeah, and probably 500 totally. But the series itself that I kept as a collection has 368. One for every day of the year, one for the millennium, one for the, and one for the leap year. So it had a couple.
I see. Okay, yeah. But if I recall, a lot of those were very muted colors. I mean,
well,
especially the storming days and the dark days.
But they're all done with yellow, red, and blue and white. Those those.
Okay.
But you can get beautiful grays, and so the concept was to capture the mood of the day. There's 1 or 2 in the collection that are almost just like a smear of nothing because it was so foggy and stuff, and just some temperature changes. If you saw it by itself, it would mean totally nothing. But within the whole entirety of the series, it's it's one of my favorite paintings. It's just
Oh
so,
yeah, that would make total sense, wouldn't it? Yeah.
yeah.
That's interesting. And so you mentioned temperature there, and so I guess I think a lot in temperature. But what do you'll probably say everything, but besides value, that we all know value is important.
Hmm.
But from what's left, hue, temperature, and chroma. Out of those three, what do you think is kind of the most important?
Well, probably, they say value is important, which it is. So when you have, when you can learn to um, paint the ground, let's say the grasses and ground plane in one value in 100 different colors, that's going to really up your game. So actually the magic grid too, because I break it up into mosaics. Let's say my whole sky is blue, but I want every mosaic, if you imagine stained glass window of a
Hmm.
different sky, but have, 100 different variations of that same value. And that's where the artist really gets control. When, we see a color, we might see green and then we might see a ochre color next to it, on the ground. And often our mind says, oh, that's two different values, but it's the same value, but just different color,
Yeah.
different temperature. So temperature and color are basically, interchangeable word in a way. But, painting, just shifting temperature instead of shifting value is really important.
Yeah. So, and that's the hard part, shifting temperature, but maintaining that same value.
Yeah. So, if you've got four gray sheets of colored paper, different grays, and you put, grids all over it, just made little color chips all over it and painted 100 different colors, and then take a black and white photo of that. Is it exactly the same gray? And that's, if you could teach yourself to do that, you really advance your painting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And my mind was blown when I first discovered that. It all of a sudden I just took a step up. It
Yeah,
was
and
is
that's
very
like back Monet, like he would paint, a river scene with the trees, two values, but had so many colors in there. It never,
yeah.
you see it in black and white. It's just a simple two value painting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so liberating for sure, right? Now when you're painting, I guess now you have more of a system. I don't want to call it a system, but the use of the magic grid really helps you develop a painting. But at some point you got to ask yourself, am I done? Like what's that decision process for you when you decide you're finished a painting?
I always just think of it as, when I'm painting it, I almost physically see my brush go around the painting. Like I'm outside and, I'm doing. All of a sudden, I'm just like going around and I realize all the relationships are correct the way I see them. The drawing doesn't need to be changed. Like, if I'm not finished, oh, this ear is just not, needs to be lower. Okay, so I fix that. Okay, go around. Oh, this is a little too dark. I fix this, and now this needs to be changed. And eventually, my brush goes around, so I see no more corrections, and so that's done. But my paintings might be so loose compared to somebody else's degree of finish, like the
Mm,
degree of, say, representation. If we think of a photograph as being, one end of it, and an abstract, bold, loose painting the other end, everybody kind of feels comfortable finishing into this degree of finish.
yeah.
And for me, my degree of finish is maybe the starting point for your degree of finish. Like you'd say, "Oh, nice blocking. Okay, now let's take it somewhere," and that's okay. So I've had collectors come in and say, "Oh, I loved your paintings earlier, and I see you're changing," and basically that means I don't like them anymore. Like, or a gallery would say, "Oh, people love your paintings, but they want them more finished." I say, "Well, then they obviously don't love them. They, they might like them, but they don't love them." You
Yeah.
know, I said, that's where I want to take it. So, it's important that you believe in yourself to say, "This is my poetry." Like if we were
Yeah.
writing poems or something, some write novels, some write poetry, some haiku, very few words. And so just believe in yourself that what you have to offer and how you want to offer it has some validity.
Yeah. And I guess that's the advantage of painting loosely or more abstract, as well as you can get away with a lot more. Some of your perspective can be a little bit off. The earlobe can be bigger, it can be redder, it can be greener. It's just how you interpret it, right? Instead of having to be
Yeah.
so refined.
However, do you know Walt Gonski's work by chance?
No, I don't.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful artist. He's one of my favorite. He just turned 81. I had lunch with him the other day, and he's from Taos and so bold, the way he puts the paint down. And people look at his work and think, oh, it's loose and you could get away with that. But his drawing ability, his draftsmanship is so good. He puts one bob down and it's a cow with udders and whatever it might have, like just in this one thing, because his drawing ability is so good. And so
Yeah.
people look at some work thinking, oh, it's a loose painting. Oh, I can get away with that. But the draftsmanship, the skills are a lot deeper than that.
Yeah.
It's not, so when the drawing is wrong, when the color is wrong, you can feel it.
And that's years of experience for sure, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So
I'm embarking on painting larger myself. A lot of my biggest stuff is, 11 by 14, maybe 12 by 16, but I'm
mhm.
starting to go really large. And so one of my questions would be to you is, when you go large, do you do intermediate studies from your plein air work to resolve some issues and to get it a little bit bigger before you do the larger pieces, or you just go straight in?
I'd say I probably go more often straight in. And I've done so many 6-inch by 8-inch paintings, on the spot in all different places. And actually, my reflections upon it was traveling in China for 5 years. And I did some 6 foot by 8 foot paintings and to add to that show. And they were all done from the little 6-inch by 8-inch paintings. And so I prefer to let it evolve and struggle out of the chaos on a big painting, so it keeps me interested and excited and more developing. I don't know where it's going to go exactly. And
Hmm.
then say I get into a complex painting that I need more information. Then I might go back to, do I need more figure studies, or if there's figures in it and I don't have enough information to get it up big. So I kind of probably build it more that way than doing many studies in the beginning.
Gotcha. So you can use your 6 by 8 for your color notes that you created on the site and for general composition. And then you have your photograph as a reference, but it only gets you so far. And then you have to decide what else you could need. And then you can go through your cycle of information and kind of add things here and there. Ah,
Yeah, like for some large paintings, yeah, I'm working on, and I just don't have the right tree information or whatever. So, I may spend days or months sometimes, photographing trees, painting different trees until I find the right thing. If I'm working on a long, complex painting, I haven't solved it for a while, but
yeah.
also I like coming out of the abstract and out of the chaos. I really like painting out of chaos, and from all the paintings I've done, if I'm doing a big painting, I'll pull out maybe 20 different paintings that I have in my studio that might have bits and pieces of information, whether it's drawing information or color information. And as you said, photo information, and just put it all around me to make something like that.
Now, out of curiosity, what's the largest piece you've painted?
Maybe I just did a mural in Guatemala. I think it was 20 feet long by 8 feet high or something. It's not done yet. I started last night.
Tell me you use a projector for that.
No, actually, it was
Oh,
coming.
God.
So far, I have to go back in November, and so I just created. Right now, it looks really great. It's all in abstract. It's made out of 4 panels, and all those things working together abstractly. Now I got to figure out what goes in those shapes and stuff.
No doubt. No doubt. And the
Yeah,
question came in, do you use a grid for the mural?
I do. Yeah, I do.
Okay. You make it a little bit easier on yourself.
Yeah, well, definitely. How do we tie all those pieces together in that long of a thing? How do we make something move your eye through that thing, hold it together? But usually I don't work. I'd say like maybe 6 by 8 feet is one of the larger pieces I do. I don't do really big ones.
Yeah. It just scares me.
Yeah,
Maybe
but
one
it's
day I'll get there.
it's scares you, but at the same time you might amaze yourself and have
Yeah.
fun. And some people work better bigger. You never know.
I'm curious as well, like when you are painting for a show or just for a gallery, do you focus on one piece at a time, or do you have like 6 going so you can kind of interchange them and get a fresh eye each time?
I usually work one at a time.
Oh,
You know,
interesting. Okay.
yeah, some larger pieces, take a long time, and I'll put them aside. And I have one. I thought it was done. It's in my studio now at home in New Mexico, and I realize when I see it again, it wasn't done. I have a lot of. I want to make some changes, and sometimes I have paintings that I try to finish, and I just can't figure out how to solve them. And then I wake up one day, and I'm in that mood. I just know how to solve these things. I've been sitting around for a while, but I prefer to kind of work more continuously on a painting, whether it's on site or in the studio, and until I finish it.
Question came in. She's asking, can you compare, if you remember, since it's been a while since you wrote your books, can you compare the three books you wrote against each other?
The very first book was in, I think I started in 92. I think it was published in 96. And, I still feel, people who are just starting out, they'll say which one you want. I said, get this one, fill your paintings with light and color. I really, as I mentioned earlier, I took a lot of classes at Scott's Art School and illustrators workshop, after being an illustrator and being in university. And as I said, I'm kind of slow, but I was able to take a lot of information from a lot of artists and find a way to say it simply. So I'm really proud of that book. And then the next book, Inside and Out, as I teach over the years, usually each book was about a 10-year in between. So as I'm teaching them, I'm finding out, how can I get to this person? How can I say it differently? Because everybody comes from a different walk of life. And, sometimes you just say the right words, you find out that what their background was, and you find a way to say it differently. And, so then I find new challenges, new different ways to say it. And so each book kind of led to the next book. And so I think I feel really good about all of them. I spend like 10 years on each one of them to make it work. And I think they're all really effective yet. So.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head about hearing it or saying it to someone so they have their aha moment in a language they understand, or even just being able to articulate in a way that they'd never heard before. And it just clicks something, right?
Yeah.
And for me, it was all about temperature. And for some people, it's about color shifting. Some people that speaks a lot to somebody, but it means absolutely nothing to me, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, we can say the same thing. And, some people say, I've been taking a class with this. And then you say something to them and they go, oh, that's it. And I go,
Yeah.
they've been telling you the same thing, but it's, just the words or the timing. Sometimes you're ready for it. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. How often have you reread the same? Well, that's the thing about the more books I read, the more they just say the same thing over and over, just in a different way. It's quite
yeah.
interesting.
And,
Yeah.
like Art Spirit, for instance, that's one of those books you can pick up over and over. And sometimes where you're at in your life, in your painting challenges, what you've got to at that point, all of a sudden you read it, and you read it maybe 10 other times, but then you're ready to accept it. You're ready to understand it.
That's right. And that's I have that as well. It's that really thin one. I can't remember the author's name though.
Oh, the Hawthorne's book.
Hawthorne's. Yeah, that's it, right?
And that's the best book I ever had.
Oh,
Besides,
really?
yeah. Oh, yeah. When what is it, maybe 60 or 90 pages, no pictures, just little blurbs, little notes from his students, but taught me how to see.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So that's my number one book out of all the books I
That's
know.
so funny. And there's the irony in that, eh? The book with no pictures taught you how to see.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, how do you find, like you've been painting, what you said, 45 years now, right? Or something like that?
Yeah.
Has your process, well, obviously it's changed from when you're beginner, but from some point when you found yourself as an artist, be able to express yourself, from that point on, has your process changed that much to now?
Yeah, it does. And there's things that I did when I was younger that, I couldn't do today. You just change in a way, even your choice of brushes, you're using them differently and you couldn't go back. And there's things, a lot of paintings, I don't know how I did them before, and sometimes the evolution, you get worse, for a while. And you go down a path that you might look back and say, oh, that was a mistake, but maybe it gets you to the next spot somehow. But definitely, I can't do some things I could do before. I love painting out of chaos, like just making a mess of things and painting blind, like
Interesting.
now I'm painting, with trying to work on my composition with the magic grid, and I'm finding a whole new exciting path. So where it will take me, Might take me a good place or bad place, but
Yeah. In a sense, they're kind of similar, right? Because the magic grid it helps you create I guess, a chaos in that one area that helps really develop the entire composition. So to me, it kind of sounds like it's the same, but obviously
well, it
different,
is.
right?
Yeah, just I just love where it's headed. My friend I mentioned Walt Gunsky, and so I showed him some of the paintings I did on the South America trip, and he says, "Oh, yeah, I love what you're doing. You look like you're getting looser." And I was worried I'm getting too tight or something. So that was kind of funny. His view
Oh,
for it.
absolutely. Well,
Yeah,
that's a compliment right there, right? That's
yeah,
fantastic.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Question came in: is there a series or place that you're dreaming of painting next?
Hmm. Yeah, well, I'm going to Italy in May, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm going back to Guatemala in November. It's just fun to go to different places. Series wise, I started doing my travels using acrylic, and so that's been a fun challenge.
Blasphemy.
Yeah, no, and I some beautiful paintings from it, so I've been enjoying that. It's just a little bit easier to travel, especially when I would go to some of the rural locations and worrying about the stink of the solvents and things like that. And
Mm,
painting watercolor too. The class I just did in China this last week was watercolor students mainly. So, it's all kind of the same thinking. You struggle with the technique of different mediums sometimes, but the thought process is the same.
yeah,
And we learn how to see it doesn't matter what medium we're used, we'll find a way to use that.
good point. Yeah, that's right. Each medium definitely has its challenge.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Technical question, kind of here for your Reflections on the Pond series.
Hmm.
Which red, yellow, and blue pigments were you using?
If I was going to just use, like want to have the full range of color, I usually use like a cad yellow light, an alizarin crimson, and ultramarine blue, and titanium white. And so the reason I chose those are the yellow is a light color, the white obviously, and then the blue is very dark and the alizarin is very dark. So it gives me a range of values. And then the red is a cooler red. I go back and forth. I'll use a cad red light in place of the alizarin, one or the other. The ultramarine is a cool blue, so I can make that cad red light cooler, but I also can make the cad red light warmer with the yellow. So those three colors, alizarin, ultramarine, and cad yellow lighter, it's a great limited full range palette. It's all you need.
That's great. Thank you. It's amazing how many palettes ultramarine blue makes it onto. It's kind of like a staple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think because it's darkness too, it gives us that
Yeah.
range.
That's right. Good
Cobalt
point.
just doesn't get as dark.
No, not at all. That's
Yeah.
right. How big were your paintings in Antarctica trip?
They were 11-14.
Oh, okay. So mid-size, I guess. Well, small
Yeah.
for you, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah, I find that to be a nice travel size, not too small, not too big.
Gotcha. And do you always fill in the full 11 by 14, or do you kind of just crop it sometimes to be square or a different
Usually, I,
proportion?
usually I fill it in, but
Okay.
obviously, yeah, like depending on, if you're on a trip and you have a little 15-minute window, yeah, put a piece of tape on it, do it half size or whatever.
Yeah, gotcha. Going back a little bit to a couple questions before when I talked about if your process has evolved or not, you talked about older paintings and whatnot. And that got me thinking about, you ever look back at some of your older paintings, whether they've been sold or whether you have them in the studio and you thought, I can't believe I painted that garbage?
Yeah, or I can't believe, well, that was a good one, but yeah, sometimes, I will have paintings sometimes that when I paint them, I come back from a trip and I don't like them,
Hmm,
have them in my drawers or whatever. And then I'll look at them 2-3 years later and go, oh, that was pretty good, and I get rid of a lot of them. I guess it's getting pretty dark. Can you still see me?
Oh, I can still see it. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Some, yeah, are just not so good, but then you look at them years later and, sometimes they're just a color notes in there that are valuable. So I don't get rid of them. And then some I burn every year. And then I look back at the photos and I go, oh, that was a good one. I was in a bad mood. I shouldn't have burned that. But
They regret.
yeah, so it's hard to judge them. When you're painting on the spot, we have to be judgmental to improve and to make our paintings better, but don't get so judgmental like you're blaming yourself. Like you get depressed
Yeah.
and look at your painting a week or two or a month later, and then make some judgments. because I often see, I'm going to move over in a little light a little bit.
Oh, for sure.
I often see my students say they judge their work, and it just brings them down too much. You have to be careful.
Yeah, it's a psychological game, isn't it?
Yeah, it's difficult. So, but we definitely have to be judging where we learn and improve. Just be careful you do a painting, sometimes like the struggle. Let's say we're painting outside and you struggle, during the whole painting process to making these decisions. You might think, oh, it was a miserable experience, a miserable painting. And then another time you're out there and oh, it's so enjoyable, so pleasurable, because maybe you're really not thinking, you're not really trying so hard, but you're having a good time. And the
Yeah.
painting is terrible. So the process and the product is two different things sometimes.
Yeah, and I think once you understand that, it's a lot more freeing, and you
Yeah.
fall less into that cycle of negativity, right?
Yeah, and you have to be really careful because we're always striving to improve, and often critiques point out all the negative things. And when I teach, it's important that I point out the positive things because let's say your brushwork is great. Well, then you don't have to worry about that. But sometimes people think, oh, well, tell me what's wrong. I go, well, knowing what's right, leads to success too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good piece of information.
I think I just dropped the thing.
Well, I got to leave that in. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So we're coming up to the end of the hour. So there's two questions that I'd like to ask, and one of them they're similar but different. So hopefully you can give two different answers. So what's the top piece of advice that you've been given?
That I've been given?
Yeah, in your many years.
Stay away from the oysters.
Painting wise, how about that? Let's change it up.
Yeah, then I was able to paint for another week. All my buddies got sick from eating the oyster. Yeah, I can't really think of. Well, one of the things way back, there was an artist lived up north, Bill Reese. Did you know him by chance?
No, the name sounds familiar though.
Washington State, great artist, good teacher. I had a trunk load of paintings when I was young, and we were actually both taking a sculpture class. And at lunch break, I asked him, "Hey, would you come look at my paintings?" And so I opened the trunk, and there were 20 paintings in the back there. And very quickly, he said, "Be more aware of negative shapes." And that made a vast difference in my work.
And that was his gut reaction when he saw everything. Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And I talk about and teach negative shape thinking all the time. And so, everything I do is I'm always thinking negative shapes. But that one tip was a beauty.
I could see that, because then that would help you stop thinking of things as things too, right?
Definitely, yeah. And it helps you with your drawing and just everything, brushwork.
Yeah, like that. That's great. Now, hopefully this is different. What's your top piece of advice you would give others?
I'd say trust yourself. Trust, like we talked about the finish, degree of finish. Well, you got to trust, you got to make that decision. Find your own voice. Let other people follow you instead of you following someone else's path.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I think we'll leave it at that. Just so everyone knows, I'm sure everyone knows Kevin, but you can find him on the internet at kevinmacpherson.com. And he's on Instagram with his handle being Kevin MacPherson 12, because I guess he's the 12th person with that name in the world. That's fantastic. I do want to say thank you very much for doing this interview. I got a lot out of it. I hope everyone attending got a lot out of it. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Michael, it was a nice conversation. It was just like we were chatting as friends. So I appreciate it. Good questions, and I hope people enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thank you, Michael.
Awesome. And with that, thank you everybody who attended, and you have a good night, Kevin. All right?
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
All right.
Cheers.